Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something foundational, looking at the forces that shape who we are. We'll be exploring the framework from, well, the renowned German psychotherapist Stefanie Stahl, specifically her big international bestseller, The Child in You. Our goal here is pretty straightforward. Give you a kind of operational manual for self-awareness. We want to cut through some of the complexity and get to the core of how those, deep-seated emotional patterns from childhood really influence your adult behavior. And, maybe most importantly, how Stahl's methods offer a practical way to, well, heal those influences. This isn't just theory we're talking about. It's potentially the key to healthier responses, better decisions, and honestly, more fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely. And to really dive in, we first need to get clear on the central idea, the inner child. Now, it's a term people hear a lot, but Stahl uses it very specifically. It's that crucial, often subconscious part of your psyche. It basically holds all your emotional history, every feeling, every memory, every response that developed way back in your early years. It's a mix, really, both the hurts and the potential.
Right. So we tend to think our adult actions are purely logical, coming from our mature selves. But you're saying this inner child is almost like an underlying emotional operating system, something that shapes our reactions, especially under pressure.
That's a great way to put it, an operating system. And the way it operates, the mechanism, is through what Stahl calls schemas. These are essentially cognitive frameworks, mental blueprints, if you like, laid down in childhood. They help us make sense of the world quickly. So if you grew up feeling safe and supported, your schemas reflect that safety, worthiness.
Okay, so they're like mental shortcuts. Useful, usually.
Exactly. But the problems start when those early experiences were negative. Maybe inconsistent parenting, lots of criticism, perhaps emotional neglect. Then the schemas formed are restrictive. They stop being helpful shortcuts. They actually become these, well, self-defeating patterns, dictating how you react to conflict or criticism, maybe even who you choose as a partner.
This is where Stahl gets really specific, right?
Yeah.
Can you give us an example, maybe one that's not immediately obvious, like feeling inadequate, something a bit subtler?
Oh, definitely. A really interesting one, often quite surprising for people, is what she might call the helper schema. You know those people, maybe you are one, who are constantly putting everyone else's needs first, sometimes to the point of complete burnout.
Yeah, the chronic people pleasers.
Exactly. Now, on the surface, it looks selfless, admirable even, but the schema underneath is often rooted in a childhood where maybe the child learned that helping got them positive attention. They felt needed, perhaps, but not necessarily loved just for being themselves, unconditionally.
Ah, okay. So the connection wasn't just love. It was love because they were useful.
Precisely. So as an adult, the subconscious logic kicks in. If I stop being helpful, I'll be abandoned or I won't be worthy, and the behavior follows. Overgiving, real difficulty saying no, maybe intense anxiety about letting people down. That adult behavior is directly linked back to the child's survival strategy. Seeing that specific connection, that's the real aha moment. That's the pivot point Stahl emphasizes for change.
So if these schemas are running in the background, kind of on autopilot, driving these negative patterns,
Yeah.
who's actually supposed to be doing the healing work? Is this where Stahl brings in that idea of the adult ego?
That's exactly it. You've hit on a crucial part of her model. If the inner child, especially the hurt part, is running the emotional show based on old scripts, the healing has to be led by the adult ego, or the adult self. This is the rational, present-day you. The adult ego's job is to be the conscious observer, the manager, the protector, and ultimately the caregiver for that inner child.
Ah, okay. So you can't just focus on the child part without empowering the adult part to handle it.
Right, just focusing on the wounds without strengthening the part of you that can actually do something about them. Well, that can be counterproductive. It can keep you stuck.
That makes sense. It also tackles that worry about getting stuck in a victim mentality, doesn't it? If the adult ego is the one in charge of change, it's about taking responsibility for changing the response, not just blaming the past.
Precisely. The adult ego sees the old pattern, maybe the shadow child's fear rising up, but chooses a different, more constructive action based on the present reality.
Okay, so let's look at the emotional landscape the adult ego needs to manage. Stahl talks about this duality within the inner child's history, right? The shadow child and the sun child.
Yes, this is a core distinction. The shadow child is essentially the part that holds all the damage, all the negative stuff. It's where the fears, the negative feelings, the limiting beliefs from those unmet needs or unresolved traumas reside. When the shadow child gets triggered and takes over, that's when we emotionally regress. We react like we did when we were small and overwhelmed.
And how does that shadow child actually show up? in our everyday, capable adult lives, it's not always obvious, is it?
No, often it's quite subtle. It might be through self-sabotage, like why do you keep quitting things just when they're about to succeed? Or those sudden emotional outbursts that feel way out of proportion to whatever just happened. Getting incredibly angry over a tiny comment from a colleague. That's often not about the comment itself. It's the shadow child reacting to a much deeper feeling, being disrespected, unseen, linking all the way back to an old wound, not about the email.
Okay. And then the flip side is the sun child.
Yes, the sun child. This represents all our innate positive qualities, our natural strengths, our resilience, confidence, that sense of joy, creativity, curiosity we had before the world started layering on those negative schemas.
So finding the sun child, that means consciously looking back, reflecting on times when you felt genuinely good, safe, valued as a kid,
Yeah.
like maybe absorbed in drawing or laughing with someone you trusted. Those positive moments are clues.
Exactly. They are vital clues. They show your adult ego what your true, unburdened nature looks like, what your potential for joy and strength actually is. It gives you something positive to aim for, to nurture.
Which brings us to the healing itself. You
Yeah.
mentioned the adult ego confronts the shadow child and nurtures the sun child. How does that work in practice?
Stahl offers some very concrete tools. It's a two-pronged approach, really. Confronting the shadow child isn't about blaming it. It's about understanding and validating its pain from an adult perspective. One key method is introspective journaling. But this isn't just, diary. It's about writing freely, almost letting the shadow child speak directly onto the page about past hurts or fears. This helps bring subconscious stuff to the surface so the adult ego can actually see it clearly.
So the adult ego needs to see the pattern first, observe it without judgment, before it can step in and do something different, okay? And once it sees the pattern, how does the direct healing happen?
That leads to a really powerful technique, the inner child dialogue. This is more structured than just general positive thinking. Your adult ego deliberately creates a mental image of your childhood self, maybe at the specific age a trauma or difficult pattern started. And then you, as your adult self, engage in a conversation with that child. You offer the understanding, the validation, the protection that was missing back then. You might literally tell that scared little version of you, it wasn't your fault. You deserve love. And I, your adult self, am here now. I've got this. I'll protect you.
Wow, okay. That sounds really profound. It's like actively reparenting yourself in a way. It shifts the past from being something that just dictates the present to something the present you can care for. That's a huge distinction.
It is. It fundamentally changes your relationship with your own history. And alongside that comes the cognitive piece, reframing beliefs. The adult ego actively identifies those core negative beliefs. I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, whatever they might be, that arose from the shadow child's experiences. And then you consciously, deliberately replace them with statements based on your current reality and strengths. I am capable. I am worthy of healthy relationships. It's not just wishful thinking, it's actively reprogramming those old schemas.
And you mentioned forgiveness earlier, too.
Yes, forgiveness is crucial. It's about releasing the emotional energy tied up in old resentments or anger. The adult ego helps the inner child let go of anger towards others who caused harm, but just as importantly, it fosters forgiveness towards oneself for past mistakes, for coping mechanisms that maybe aren't helpful anymore. It frees up so much energy.
So we have these deep internal tools, journaling, dialogue, reframing, forgiveness. But what about day-to-day? How does Stahl suggest keeping the adult ego strong enough to actually use these tools consistently?
Right, because it's ongoing work. Chapter 5 of her book provides a great toolkit for this. Mindfulness practices are key. Things like deep breathing, body scans, they sound simple, but they are incredibly powerful for pulling your adult ego back into the present moment. They help stop the shadow child from dragging you into past anxieties or future worries. If your body is calm, your mind follows.
That makes sense. Grounding yourself in the now.
Exactly. And she also touches on body-oriented therapies, things like gentle yoga, progressive muscle relaxation. This acknowledges that trauma and difficult emotions aren't just thoughts. They get stored physically in muscle tension and posture. Releasing that physical tension helps release the emotional baggage, too.
And nurturing the sun child needs to be active, too, right? Not just remembering it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a daily practice. This means consciously making space for joyful activities. Whatever reconnects you with that sense of genuine curiosity, playfulness, or wonder you had as a child. It could be painting, dancing, hiking, even just being silly. That intentional cultivation of joy reinforces the positive identity, the strengths that the sun child holds. It builds resilience.
Okay, so we do this internal work, confronting the shadow, nurturing the sun, strengthening the adult ego. The real acid test, I suppose, is how this changes our interactions with other people, our relationships. That's where the friction often shows up most clearly.
Absolutely. Unresolved inner child issues are notorious for causing chaos in adult relationships, often leading to confusion, conflict, repeating patterns. When the adult ego isn't firmly in the driver's seat, the shadow child often steps in and relates to a partner almost as if they were a parent figure from the past.
Right, and that's where things like projection and transference come in.
Exactly. Those are the mechanisms. Projection is maybe a bit more straightforward. You attribute your own unacceptable feelings or thoughts onto someone else. Like, if you feel deeply insecure, you might constantly accuse your partner of being critical or distant, projecting your own fear. Transference is more specific. It's when you unconsciously redirect emotions, desires, or expectations that you originally felt towards a significant figure in your childhood, often a parent, onto your current partner.
Okay, that distinction is important. Can we walk through that transference idea? Use that example of the child who felt neglected. How does that play out in an adult relationship when the shadow child gets activated?
Sure. Let's take someone whose shadow child developed a core belief, a schema, that they have to be perfect or achieve things to get attention and feel worthy. Now, fast forward to adulthood. Their partner has a really busy week, maybe stressed, and simply forgets to ask about a big presentation they gave at work, a simple oversight.
Okay, the adult part might understand, but the shadow child?
The shadow child doesn't see it as an oversight. It interprets that lack of attention through its old lens. It feels like direct confirmation of the original wound. See, you're not important enough. You didn't perform well enough to be remembered. And this triggers an immediate, overwhelming emotional reaction, maybe intense hurt, maybe anger, maybe withdrawal. It feels enormous, disproportionate. Because the partner isn't just a partner in that moment, they've momentarily become the stand-in for the figure who originally withheld that needed attention or approval. The reaction is to the past, not the present forgetfulness.
Wow. Okay, so the key then is bringing the adult ego back online during those interactions. How do we do that? What are the techniques for healthier relating?
It starts with fostering self-awareness. That's step one, catching the shadow child in the act, so to speak. When you feel that wave of intense, maybe disproportionate emotion starting to rise in an interaction, you need to develop the habit of pausing internally. Asking yourself, hang on, is this my adult self responding to what's actually happening right now? Or is this my younger self reacting to an old echo?
Just creating that little bit of space for reflection.
Exactly. That space allows the adult ego to step back in. Then you move to open communication. But crucially, it's expressing your need without making it an accusation. So instead of saying, you never care about my work, which puts the other person on the defensive, the adult ego uses language that owns the internal experience. Something like, you know, I realized that when you didn't ask about my presentation, I felt surprisingly hurt and insecure. And I think it reminded me of how I felt sometimes when I was little and needed attention. What I actually need right now is maybe just 5 minutes of your undivided attention so I can feel connected.
That changes everything. It's vulnerable, yes, but it invites understanding instead of conflict. It gives your partner insight, not just blame. And you mentioned boundaries earlier, too. That seems critical here.
Absolutely. Setting boundaries is essential for protecting this healthier way of relating. Boundaries are basically the adult ego saying, this is where I end and you begin. These are my needs and these are my limits. It might mean saying respectfully, I need some space right now because I feel overwhelmed, or I can't be responsible for managing your emotions, but I can listen. These boundaries protect the progress you've made. They stop the shadow child's fears or the sun child's vulnerability from being trampled on and keep the relationship balanced.
So this whole journey, understanding the schemas, seeing the shadow child, empowering the adult ego to have these dialogues and reframe beliefs, actively nurturing the sun child. It leads to some pretty fundamental shifts. It's not a one-and-done fix, though, is it? It sounds like a continuous practice.
Definitely continuous. It's a cyclical process, really. You keep observing, understanding, adjusting. But the outcome is significant. It's about gaining freedom. Freedom from those automatic historical reactions. By consciously integrating your adult ego into daily life, by being aware of your inner child, you develop greater self-awareness, much more resilience when things get tough, and a deeper emotional stability. You're no longer just reacting from your history, you're consciously choosing your response in the present moment.
It really sounds like it's about reclaiming your authentic self, breaking free from limitations that were maybe set decades ago based on experiences you didn't choose. So as you think about all this, here's something to consider. What's the single most powerful positive quality of your sun child? Maybe it's a sense of joy, maybe fierce creativity, maybe a quiet confidence. Whatever it is for you, think about how much you might be letting adult stress or those old shadow child patterns suppress that quality right now. And then ask yourself, how could you consciously reintroduce that specific quality back into your life, not just as a hobby, but as a core part of who you are, starting today? Just explore that possibility.